someone else to say this. I'm not an economist in any way, but it seems like UBI is kind of is creating a higher value of human labor because you're taking out the requirement for people to work to earn income. So that seems to me like in the service economy that's going to play out in a lot of services becoming a lot more expensive, like going out to eat or like having your laundry done. And so I guess I haven't heard a lot of talk on how that's going to then affect like the amount of money that people have to spend and like the ways that we socially adapt to that. So like, okay, if going out to a restaurant becomes more expensive, then we just go to the grocery store more and I guess like pack your lunch. And so this is the provocative thing I'm going to say is like it would be kind of interesting to think about this in terms of gendered effects. So if the price of a lot of services outside of the home become more expensive, it's likely that there will be a gendered way in which these things are then taken care of in internal household economies. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting, like for a lot of, like if families are kind of economic units, then there can be a division of labor within families, and maybe one good thing about people being sort of required to work for income is that it puts a lot of women in the workplace who wouldn't really be out of the home otherwise. And like I said, it's hard to know how things like this would play out, but I think that it's something to be considered. Like if services become really, like I'm really just thinking about in terms of
it could also be cheaper because people will have basic incomes that if they work together, they can form more restaurants like Lentillas, anything in Newtown.
Yes.
So there'll be greater diversity. So
how many people would willingly spend their time with like 5 or 6 2-year-olds that are not theirs? Like,
I know.
It depends. Yeah,
but why aren't they doing it right now?
Because they desperately need more money than they get from doing that, so they don't bother.
So you're saying that they'll volunteer for free for $18,000, but they won't take
not all of their time.
$40,000 per year to work as a childcare worker right now.
There's also
I think
if they can find a job.
I think if you make it like, I don't think that there'll be more people. I think there'll absolutely definitely be less people willing to do childcare, and it's going to push up the prices of that by a lot. And you see what happens, like when I come from the western suburbs, like people are very poor around there. There's a lot more stay-at-home mums in that area just because of the price.
Well, I will speak as a carer, and I don't have to be a carer, but I do become a carer because I like the job. I took care of my parents for 8 years. When they died, there was an old couple that said, "We're getting too old to care for ourselves. Would you like to live with us, rent-free?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love that." It's the reason why some don't like being a carer is because while caring, they have other shitty economic concerns to address. Like, instead of caring for my child, I would like to earn extra money so that I can buy her better clothes or better food. There is that lack of security that makes shitty jobs even shittier. And a UBI can make it more bearable and more enjoyable.
Can I ask the question? Sorry, is it all right?
I was just going to ask if the UBI is a thing that everybody receives, full stop, end of story, or is it just...
My objective here is to show, can we generate financial resources to do that? My answer is yes. Is a UBI the answer? My answer is no, because there will be one indigenous peoples who will say, "I don't need money. I want my rights respected." So that's a whole group of people who will not require cash, but require a protection of resources, and the rights to live on Earth on their terms, self-determination. Children won't require as much as adults. That's another case. So we have to be careful not to think that the UBI is a one-size-fits-all panacea, where everything will be hunky-dory.
I just mean from the angle of, could I get that and then do menial side work to buff my wage, but then still have the 18
Yes,
that dignity?
yes, that's a marginal cost pricing of labor. Because, gosh, I mean, if you find work that's meaningful and your basic subsistence has already been met, you'll be glad to volunteer for it and learn. And you know that over time, you'll generate more economic value as a volunteer.
Can I bring us back to the question about childcare? Because I had a thought, and I mean, people may agree or disagree with this, but you do hear a lot about people who work long hours and pay exorbitant amounts for childcare because they love their career. But the question comes back to the fact that if someone chooses to, or has the situation of having children, or having a family, isn't part of that spending time with the family? And in doing so, wouldn't that reduce the amount of childcare that you may need if you didn't have to work as many hours?
Sure.
And isn't part of the benefit of having family to spend time with them? Whether they're your children or your sibling's child or grandchildren, etc. And same thing with the elderly.
That's true.
I mean, obviously that's a blanket term. We don't all love our families as
I
much as
personally
each other.
think there's a lot of parents out there who are worth a lot more than $18,000 per year. A lot more than $18,000 per year. And so, like, ultimately, and this is the situation with childcare, and I've done a blog post on it on the Science Party website and a little bit of very basic modelling on it. But when you look at the value of women getting back into the workforce and maintaining their skills over their lifetime, you could collect more taxes from them over their lifetime, and they'll be heaps richer if they go back into the workforce, you know, after a certain amount of time, rather than being forced to stay at home just through economic necessity, right? But we don't do that because it's a short-term thing. You have to balance this budget. You know, that parent needs to put food on the table today, not 30 years from now. And so that's a huge issue there. And
isn't that kind of though the way that the country as a whole looks at the value of the child?
Yeah.
You're casting an assumption as well that if we had this universal basic income, that the person who would choose to spend most of the time at home with the child, and the person who is more likely to be going off and looking for, I'm going to go start a business or go play golf, that the father's going to be the one shirking that responsibility, or fathers or mothers, depending on the grouping.
Forget about who it is. Forget about gender completely, right?
Yeah.
There will be people, if childcare becomes substantially more expensive as a result of universal basic income, there will be people who miss out on childcare, not because they want to spend more time with their kids, but because it's just simply too expensive. So if you have more than 2 kids and you're earning minimum wage at the moment, it's uneconomic.
You see, you're operating on the current mainstream economic thinking about pricing. Because with the UBI, you'll be free to care. You'll be able to care for your kids better at home without thinking of other economic.
No, what happens if you don't want to? Like, that's the great thing about capitalism in general. Like, if you don't want to stay at home, you can
still pay for it, and the child's going to be receiving some volume of capital based on the system anyway. So you could take the money that, say, that you get 10 grand for the kid a year, just take that and go, there you go, whatever, baby gone. And
no, you can't get money from nowhere. If you've got universal basic income, right, you will need to have a higher tax rate in that first level.
That's not my framework. A tax rate. We're not taxing income here. Sorry. Sorry. You're using your old framework. I'm using a different one. By your old framework, it won't work. I agree.
I have disagreements about what you can do with the basic income, generating it from land taxes, for example. So, for example, you're going up by 6% per year. You have no effect.
That's why you seigniorage. They have to go together.
But like, if you're saying that the value of land is overvalued at the moment because we're not taxing it, we're not like trying to capture the economic rents that these landowners are getting for free, right? You're saying that like we're going to capture all those economic rents and the base capital value of the asset isn't going to go down, but it will. It absolutely will. And especially if you're talking about 3% per year, like tax on that, you would be struggling to have any
and I'll say it's good, and I will say it's good when it falls, because now people can afford homes.
Yeah, but your land value tax goes down.
Yes,
I think
but
we have
then
to be careful not to think within the current paradigms.
No, I'm
Because
talking about
what
the
we're talking
model,
about here
Joffre.
is completely new models
Yeah,
that don't have any relationship to where we are right now.
I'm
That's the way
talking
I see
about
it.
Joffre's model right here. I got it on my laptop.
But even
It's-
that model will synthesize into something else. It won't be the same. I think we need to open our minds to completely new paradigms here which we can create.
You're judging my model based on your model, which doesn't exactly work. It's like judging a high-speed railway
Yeah.
in Tokyo by the standards of city railway.
James, what are your thoughts on this? Sorry, before you go on. Yeah, you go, keep going.
I was just going to say, but we do have to use the understanding of how economies work that we currently have to project how it's going to work in the future. You can't say, right, well, we're just totally reorganising the economy. To use the train example, we have to use the basic physics that we're applying to our trains to understand the bullet trains.
Yes, and which means you're going to have to redesign the whole train system, because the city rail does not operate on the same system as the bullet train, but you want the bullet train speed.
Sorry, yeah. Guys, yeah. So James has got a point over here.
A lot of the problems is you can't project the future, because a lot of the systems are reflexive. They react to the circumstances. People learn to do things to somehow rot the system. They come out. Now, my first impression with what I'm saying, won't a lot of people simply look at this and say, my kids can earn $18,000 a year, so let's have 20 of them. And a really short space of time. Buy a house.
That sounds logical, but look at history and data. No. History and data. Because you're using logic. It's like when you apply logic, Luddites are correct that technologies will kill jobs. But I teach economic history of economic thought. My challenge to all my students is, if you can prove to me a point in history where massive unemployment happened because of a technological breakthrough, I'll give you an A and you don't have to attend my course. None of them could. But logically, you're right. In the same way, logically, you're correct, but historically and empirically, that never happened. The more prosperous a country became, the lower the population growth.
That's correct.
See, I'm using empirical data, history, and all you give me is the logic of a Luddite.
One thing about the whole thing with like having a lot of children, and I come from a family of 12, is that, so I have a little bit of experience, not raising them, but as someone who has 9 siblings. And it is that the primary cost when there are a lot of children in the family is not monetary. We got by on one income. It's the fact that the amount of time and care that goes into raising those children. And I don't think many people can do that. I don't think anyone wants that. It's pretty horrible.
I understand. I just remember my own education. One of my teachers once telling me that the reason countries like India, etc., were so poor was because they had so many kids who were unproductive.
It's the other way around. They have a lot of kids because they're so poor. Sorry.
I'm sorry, they have a lot
They
of
have a
kids.
lot of kids
Because they're
so poor.
They need more hands on deck, yeah.
I mean, I've worked with the poor myself. The reason why a woman would want a baby while begging is because she can get money, more money with a baby in her hand than without one.
You've just invented a system that will give them more money for that baby, and
No, I mean, so that they will not have to beg.
We already had that in place though here with the baby bonus and with other things. And I'm from northern New South Wales. The place is a shithole. Teen pregnancy is massive. People just produce babies willy-nilly. And even with that thing in place, at no point did I see any family explosions out to like 6 or 7. It got to about 2 or 3, and then people were like, fuck, tie the tubes, cut off his balls, horrible, screaming, shitting infants everywhere.
There's no amount of money that's going to make
Yeah, there's not enough money to make people withstand the horror of children. It's just not going to happen. And there's a great website called Gapminder where they go into the way what's been happening with population. Like the fact that population is probably going to cap out at about 11 billion globally. is because as people push in towards cities have an effect of reducing birth rates. I don't know why, but they do. And economics and other education, and economics and education have reduced birth rates in every country they've been really applied. Bangladesh had a really horrendous birth rate. It was like 8 children for every woman, and they've effectively managed to reduce that to 2.7, which is below France, which is at 3.1, or was last time I looked at those statistics. And that's a country that you traditionally look at and think, hey, sweatshops. So I just don't think, even if you were giving people, if you turned around tomorrow and said, we need more cannon fodder, we're going to invade Indonesia in 18 years, everybody start reading, we'll give you $100,000 for every child. It wouldn't, I don't think you'd see a really, really super dramatic
Except
increase.
that's not true. The baby bonus did produce an immediate effect on the birth rate.
It was tiny.
I'm not saying it's
tiny,
as excessive as what we're discussing when we go to 10, 20, whatever. But I am saying it did have an immediate effect, so you can't discount that. And if you want to move to this system, you can't just discount the current thinking, because everyone's going to go into it going
with the existing,
Given that we have an aging population.
But
I just want to ask that question.
Yeah, keep to that. That's what you said. Discount. We can't. What's the discount rate? The discount might be. It's certainly not the exaggerated discount rate that this gentleman raised. It won't be that. And going back to the framework, you're right. If we have to understand the bullet train, we will understand it first from city rail. But I will agree. If you push a city rail train to go 400 kilometers per hour, you'll have a really bad accident. And that's why you need a different system in order for it to travel 400 kph. In the same way, if you apply a UBI without changing this economic framework, you're really in for a real bad accident. Yeah, I agree. But if you're going to restructure taxation and monetary systems, then it's achievable.
Back to incentivizing. So I know James is talking about, okay, you're going to increase the price of childcare because you're introducing UBI. But you're really trying to incentivize where people no longer have to work in that childcare place if they don't want to volunteer in that sort of area, right? In the future, you want to incentivize. No, this is what I'm saying. It's like the shit. What was it? The guy who digs the shit out of the ground or something, right? What was it? Who was the guy?
I think the point is
just like you're doing shit work, right? We're trying to disincentivize you to do work shit.
Are you gonna ban people from having kids?
No one will be banned.
No. What do you want to incentivize? So essentially, innovations in the childcare, right? Where you don't need as many people to get your child care.
I think childcare is a pretty special thing where,
robots.
Yeah, exactly.
Can robots
out of all the
do
things
childcare?
Automate, socializing a child is probably going to be one of the last ones.
Yeah, people won't even put it in their driverless cars. Like they won't put their kids in driverless cars until maybe a few more decades, right?
Yeah, what if they go with the Finnish model then? The one that there's a couple of really interesting childcare centres out there where they basically take the children and then they just kind of dump them in the forest.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? It doesn't matter how you do it. You're trying to incentivize innovation in the in that industry.
But there is innovation.
I think the idea, it's okay to have. I think the childcare problem is a legitimate problem. It's a legitimate thing to look at, and I don't think that we can really answer it right now because we don't have the data. We don't actually understand what's going to happen, and I don't think any of us have really good solutions to it. It's okay to have a problem with a model. It's okay to have that on the board go, we need to solve this at some point and figure out how this is going to work. That's okay.
But
that's okay. You don't have to sell the whole thing 100%.
Communist childcare
for it to be
centres
a
where every
good
parent
framework.
has to volunteer part of their time to have a child in the centre. That seems like a
That's the first time I heard communists. Oh, no, it's the second time. That's right.
prior to someone going to I think preschool, there are centres that people do community volunteer. And so you might have 5 volunteers, and the parents just take a turn, so they might say, I'll do this fortnight. And then the rest of the time their kid has somewhere to go when they want to go work or do whatever else.
That's how it used to be done.
Childcare
Before women went
workers...
to work, everyone went over to one person's house and all the kids were looked after.
It's a good
But
point.
childcare workers are skilled workers, right? Like they go to university and they get a degree.
It's a highly regulated.
Regulated industry, and like, I don't know, maybe it would work in certain situations where you have small towns and everyone knows each other, and if someone messes up, they're gonna like feel really bad because everyone's gonna ostracize them. But in a society where it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna drop my kid with this person I've never met, no qualifications, like, are we gonna feel happy about that? I'm not
I
sure
think
that we are. Like,
that would be an exaggeration
we have
because
to-
that's not happening in economies that have a UBI. Come on, that doesn't happen in Finland. You see them complaining that, oh, we're having a childcare crisis.
Well, in Finland, I mean, what is it, 800 euros a month everyone's getting.
Yeah, they're also paying 58% tax on the euro, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a pretty high tax rate, but it's also because they're capturing the economic rent from that tax rate. And do you see families complaining, oh, childcare is too expensive? It's expensive for those who are not residents or not citizens. Remember that cab driver I told you? As I said, operating on a capitalist system purely and applying a UBI, it won't work. In the same way it didn't work for that taxi cab driver.
You said a word just then which was very interesting.
It had to
like
be a
in the
citizen.
same sentence you said UBI, unconditional basic income, and you said citizens.
Yes.
So everyone says unconditional basic income. Pretty much every single model has a condition, which is that you're a citizen. And I'm not a racist. I love migrants and I want more of them to come. But I'm very worried about UBI making people feel like, oh, we can't bring more in because they're taking our money.
People already feel that way anyway.
To a degree, but the reality of the situation is that most migrants who come here actually just want a job. They don't look at you know, the very, very low Centrelink money, like $13,000 a year, and go, oh yeah, I'd love that. But when you start getting to levels where it's actually, you can have a reasonable life on it, people might be...
And that's a model that does not capture economic rent, mind you.
So,
James' model is what does not capture economic rent. That's why there's less for all.
just is your, let's say we'll call this your model, what's the nearest historically to this being tried? Has it ever?
Social Security.
That's a good question. I'm trying to get different models where there are successes, like the financial model I have are based on financial successes of Raiffeisen banks, credit unions, and Raiffeisen and microfinance institutions that follow strict discipline. You apply that with land value taxation, which works pretty well in Singapore, Hong Kong, parts of Japan. So it's pretty much like you've got good parts of certain vehicles that you're putting together to build a new vehicle. That would be my approach, how I would describe my approach. Is it based on one historical country that did this? I'd say, I don't think so. But is it based on parts I got from successful countries and historical cases? Yes, I'll say it is.
Okay.
One question more for me that, of course, what I came here for. What do we do when there's no jobs? When there's nothing that machines cannot do better than us?
Gosh, enrich yourself. Remember that Star Trek film short that I showed? They discovered this billionaire, the richest man in the world, out of suspended animation, and he's demanding, throwing his weight around that, you know, you pay attention to me because I'm the richest man in the world. And in the end you realize that, oh, my wealth is gone and my office is gone. What will I do? Oh, don't worry, you won't starve. Do what you enrich yourself. I said, I've lost my wealth. What is there to live for? Be yourself. Excel.
But don't you see a psychological problem there? Don't you see the
Look,
disempowerment?
everything has psychological problems, including our status quo.
Robots will just make us fight in pits. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
They already said that
Come on.
people lose.
Yeah.
I'm not promising.
AI said.
I'm not promising paradise. What I'm promising is a real close to elimination of total poverty, a closer approximation of equality and economic rights. And I'm basing it also on an experience I had, I mean, well, not experience I had, but a story about my grandfather, why it's close to me. When my grandfather had a land concession where there were indigenous peoples there, he didn't tell them, I own this land, you work for me or you get out. He actually didn't say, I own this land. He goes, I want to plant and harvest coconuts, and I want you to help me. What will make it worth your while to do that? And so they negotiated, and they were friends. And when the war came, the first volunteers were the indigenous peoples. And that comes from a respect that there was a point in history where people were free to work for themselves. They were not compelled to work for another. We've lost that basic freedom. What we're trying to do is develop a system that can restore that basic freedom in a modern context. And let's be honest, there were problems then, in the same way there will be problems if we apply the system. It's not paradise, but at least we are addressing certain problems that we want a UBI to address.
Okay. All right, well, with that, I think I'll call this a close. Thanks so much for Joffre. Thanks for that. Thank you guys as well for sharing your thoughts. I'll take a few of those photos, I'll post it on Facebook, and yeah.